Kusum Tamang Poudyal. It's so good to have you here today and to be able to share your inspiring story and your life's work with our Inspiring Humans audience. So thank you so much for coming and for being part of the Inspiring Human podcast series.
Thank you so much, Steph. I'm really glad to be here today and really honored to be a part of this podcast. Thank you.
Amazing. And just before we begin, I'd love to give a bit of a background, a sense of, exactly what you've been doing to the listeners, which is amazing, inspiring. You're born in Nepal and your life's work and your life's mission is around helping others there's so much need in the different communities in Nepal, and even now working in Rohingya refugee communities in Kathmandu as well, and look forward to hearing all about that. But also, very inspiring story that I'll ask you to share more about, but a background of kind of self-development. And I know you've done travel and you've participated in leadership programs and things to progress your evolution and the ability that you have to be able to give out to others and share with others, as well as, you've had a history in being involved in a number of different areas, but in the media as well, and helping charities through that role to have a greater platform to, share their story and fundraise, gather funds. And now into, another inspiring aspect of your life is the sustainability, and you're living in a tiny house and you've joined forces with the tiny house movement, which is very unique actually in Nepal. And I feel like, lots of people will be inspired by the actions that you've taken and by your lifestyle to join in and to live more sustainably themselves. And I know that you're looking at hydroponics and aquaponics and how to grow organic vegetables and all things sustainability. So I look forward to asking a few questions to share with our amazing listeners in this interview.
Absolutely.
So maybe if you could give us a bit of a more in-depth insight into your background and, what really sparked and ignited the passion that you have to give so much to the community.
I think I should start it with my first, journey, my first leg of, moving abroad to Burma, which is called Myanmar now. So I studied there for 3 years, and I think that's when I started to recognize my interest in the community field, in helping others. I like to call it serving others. So, when I was there, I was only about 17. So I was there between 17 to 20 years, and I visited a lot of villages there, a lot of monasteries. And there, I think, was an incident where an elderly lady just, she kind of blessed me and told me, like, you're meant to serve people, and I really want you to do that in future. And I think I always had that interest, and that sort of, stamped it, like, yes, this is what I'm meant to do. So it was almost like a calling. And that's how I decided to go for making this as my profession, or this as my main job. And apart from that, I had always seen my parents helping others. So we would have people come to our houses, and and they would be distributing food and clothes and books and stationery. So I'd always seen that, and I knew that it always felt really good to be able to do that. The feeling is just very different from doing anything else. So I think that's how my passion towards community work developed, and it's only grown in the years that came by. So I think that's how it started.
Amazing. And the time that you spent in Australia then doing, I know it was a short time, but doing the leadership program, can you give us a bit of an insight into what someone like you that had the experience of living in Nepal and living in Myanmar then to do a leadership program in Australia, what were the main takeaways for you?
Australia was, I think, the country where I started my actual career. So I studied there and I worked there, and I was part of the leadership program 2 or 3 times. So to be able to be with the people who had the same energy, who had the same enthusiasm to lead, to share and to learn and to grow in life, it was such an inspirational experience for me. So when I met people from all stages of life, from all different countries, different races, and it was just amazing to see how people everywhere in the world have that that yearning to do something and to serve in different areas of their life, or different expertise, I would say. And we still have shared the same zeal about it, and we were all really wanting to learn and grow and take something new from that leadership program. So being part of that, I think sort of changed how I looked at myself and how I looked at doing things. And it also really taught me what professionalism is, what organizing yourself is, what focus is, what growth is, what goal is. So these were really good insights that I was able to learn from these leadership programs, and they were all of international standards, I would say. I only say that because in Nepal, even though we have leadership programs, there's always something that sort of I personally feel like doesn't have that international touch to it. And I think that's also because, sharing the same kind of ideas with the local people versus the people from around the world is a completely different experience. So that I would say opened my mind immensely, opened my heart immensely. And I learned to, accept, adapt to new things, and, learn and unlearn myself, and then learn again. So that was, I think, a very good experience for me, and also brought a lot of, the realization that no matter how much I learn, no matter how much I succeed, I must stay humble and I must stay on the ground. So I think that were some of my learnings.
They're amazing learnings, and I love, I really sense from you since I met you that curiosity and that hunger for learning and hunger for self-improvement, and just learning, constant kind of improvement. And I think that's really admirable. So, and I love the way that you said when you were in Myanmar, how someone really drew the potential out in you by saying that you're here to serve. And I think we can do that for everybody, for each other as well, because as you said, your experience of meeting different people, everyone has that innate desire to be able to make a difference to others in their lives. So that's such a powerful example of someone saying that to you and really bringing you out of yourself and going, okay, this is, and also well done for taking that as a nudge from life, because you went with that and you were like, I'm going to go for it and follow this path. And that's amazing. So I love that as an example of how powerful it is when we encourage each other. So I know that you're also a member of like a lot of different associations, which has probably helped a lot in you being resourceful, in being able to make more of a difference. So can you kind of speak to that a little bit as well?
Sure. So in the past, when I was in Australia, I was working with the Salvation Army. So that, and particularly in the area of homelessness and drugs and alcohol and domestic violence and mental health. So, working in that area, I think brought even more, realization of, how life can be and how life choices can be, and also how we can be empathetic to people, how we can be understanding, and how we can be non-judgmental towards different situations. So this experience really brought into a lot of that factor inside me. And then when I went to India, I worked in a few different foundations, particularly around disability and also around crowdfunding. So and again, from Nepal to Myanmar to Australia, and then suddenly to India, which is a completely different country, a different dynamic altogether. It was quite an interesting thing. So I was in South India, and the population, everything is just exponentially. It's a very different comparison altogether. But being able to work there with the communities, being able to understand their culture and also the needs in that community, sort of brought in even more knowledge, I would say, about how different cultures have different ways of doing things, or ways of serving the community, or bringing out ideas and strategies around developing a community or empowering a community, but how the core of everything always remains the same, which is empowerment, which is love, which is gratitude, which is service. So and then coming back to Nepal, which has been around 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years, and again I brought in those ideas, those knowledge from those countries, and started a crowdfunding platform myself, which could be a very good resource, and it is actually in a way a good resource for many different organizations at the moment. And not only that, trying to build capacity of those organizations as well, in terms of training, in terms of communication, and so on, and also being able to take all of those 10, 12, 13 years of experience and knowledge that I've learned, that I've gathered in those countries, to be able to train, to be able to share all of that to the organizations here. So I'm part of different organizations, sometimes as a volunteer, sometimes as a member, sometimes just as a consultant to help them grow, because I believe, like in the area of service, and when we are doing community work, when we call it social work here, it's not always about it's not always about earning, it's not always about benefits, it's not always about give and take. It's not like business at all. A lot of it is about sharing resources, a lot of it is about caring for one another, and it's not only from one person to another, it's from one organization to another as well, and also collaborating in many different ways, so that we can grow together, because the ultimate goal of it is to serve the community and to empower them, and also in a way that we give them some sustainable resource to become independent on their own. So so that's what I have been doing for the last few years when I've, as I, returned to Nepal. So right now I am heading Hiteri Foundation, which is primarily a crowdfunding platform, but we have also started to evolve ourselves as, crisis management service, and also working with daily wage workers, and also very recently with the refugee communities, particularly Rohingya communities in Nepal. So and apart from that, I'm also a member of Hattihatti Nepal, and been volunteering here and there with many different organizations. So I think that's what I've been doing at the moment.
Yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned collaboration between organisations to grow together, because I think someone like you, who is part of lots of different, organisations and can see the bigger picture of how to collaborate in interesting ways, as you said, that's an incredible skill to have, because you bring people together and multiply the impact, because as you said, the common goal is the same for many organisations, to empower the people to, resolve poverty where it doesn't need to exist, where, because a lot of the time, all the organisations, if they collaborate, they would have the resources needed to make massive transformations. So I think that's an incredible role that you take on, and that you recognise and acknowledge is important. So I know that you are also like a member of like a lot of the expat community Facebook pages, and a Rotary member as well. Can you speak to how has Rotary been able to help you in what you're doing currently?
So Rotary, I've been a part of Rotary for the last 2.5 years, and I saw that as a really good potential, a really good resource potential, I would say, to be able to, do a project, a service project in a community, and it could be a small scale or a very large scale. So, and Rotary is all about, serving the community. So and everyone's a volunteer, everyone has the same interest, same passion to, be able to serve when they can. So I saw that potential, and that's how I have been a part of it. And right now I am a member of Rotary E-Club 329 to Nepal, which is the only e-club in Nepal, which means we can have virtual meetings as well. and I head the service committee this year. So we've been doing a lot of service projects because of the knowledge, because of the experience that I have had. So, Rotary is a very large a community, and I am a part of it. So it really opens up the opportunities of working together with other clubs and working internationally, and also perhaps securing some grants which are again put back into the community, where there is no agenda of benefit, where there is no agenda of corruption, because all the Rotarians are just there to volunteer and serve. So that way Rotary has been really good for me, and not only in terms of me being able to share what I know, but also in terms of learning so much about the large resource that they have internationally. So I think that's where that's my interest in Rotary, and right now we are also grant, so that's again going to build more opportunities in the future to do sustainable as well as long-term projects. So yeah, that's what we're looking at.
Awesome. And just for people that may not have traveled to Nepal or may know very little about Nepal like I did before I went, like those many, many years ago, can you set the scene about Nepal as a country, and how would you describe the people and the context of Nepal, and the environment of the international aid and development sector in Nepal?
Mm-hmm. So being a Nepali, I love Nepal. So I would say like Nepal is wonderful, it's perfect, but as any country, it has its flaws, and being a developing country, it definitely has a lot of them. But apart from that, if you only look at Kathmandu or the major cities of Nepal, they are heavily populated, it's kind of polluted, but the majority of the offices, even international aid offices, are all in Kathmandu, and that's the capital of of Nepal. But as soon as you head out of these cities, from these congested areas, then you are going to see the actual beauty of what Nepal is. It's surrounded with beautiful green hills and mountains and lakes, and a lot of hiking and trekking opportunities, and also the villages that you see in between those areas. The villagers, the people who live there are still very loving, very caring, very hospitable. The houses are very traditionally built. There's I would say still a very pure form of beauty that you see in many parts of the villages in Nepal. The cities are obviously urbanized and very commercial. And because Nepal is a developing country, we have seen international aid from a very long time. I think when it started in the early 19, I would say it started from 1930s or so. In that span of time, we've had a lot of aid from all over the world, and that still continues today. So people are mostly organizations, international organizations are mostly helping Nepal in education, in water sanitation, I would say WASH now, and in women empowerment, and right now in sustainable development. So if you come to Nepal, you're going to see a lot of those international aid organizations here. And if you go to different villages, if you love to trek or hike or travel to those places, you will see many installments of these international aids in forms of water tanks, schools, toilets, and even bigger, buildings such as clubs and so on. So that's what the scenario of international aid in Nepal is. I would say it has decreased a little bit in the past few years, because Nepal is no more, going to be under a very poor poverty line. It's not going to be, in reality, it's very difficult to explain, but it's no more in a very severely poor country, because the GDP of people is improving, the economy is improving, education is improving. But at the same time, there's so many factors, political, social, economical factors that are still not yet put in place, and that it's still not organized. And until that is done, I think the aids are still going to come and help Nepal, build itself into a stage where it can be independent. So that's where we are at the moment. We're no longer very innocent, naive, country which doesn't know anything anymore, because we didn't have literacy, we didn't have education, we didn't have the resources before. But now we are at the stage where we actually have those resources, but we don't know what to do with it. So the aids are mostly helping us with sustainable development at the moment. So that's how I see it at the moment.
And what would you say would be paint a bit of a picture for us about the communities that you work in and the needs that you see in the communities, and the need for you to come in and, as you said, serve the people? Where are the kind of gaps that you've seen that people really need, a step up or a hand up with?
So this is very interesting, because whenever we talk about development and serving communities, the first thing that we think about is rural communities. We think about villages. There's no school there, there's no women empowerment projects there. But when I started working distributing food during the COVID-19 crisis, so we were serving food all those 9 months of lockdown. We were serving food on the streets every day. We were providing food packs to families, to daily wage workers. And that's when we realized that within these clusters in Kathmandu, particularly, which is the capital, there is something we have named it the urban poor. So there's so many families, who are daily wage workers, and who would not have any work otherwise. If there was a lockdown, or if there was a holiday, or if there was a strike, they would have absolutely nothing to do, and they would not have food on the plate the very same day. And these people were mostly falling through the loopholes. Whenever there is an aid, whenever there is a project, it all goes to the villages. And these people here living inside the cities in these clusters, in almost dilapidated buildings, and really no resources of good water or electricity or education, are the ones who have fallen behind. And we thought that these would be the communities which we could work with, because they're accessible, we can reach out to them easily, while at the same time they're living in the city where there's so many resources that we can string them onto, where we can connect them onto, but they're not at the moment. So this is one of the areas that I have recognized at the moment, working with the people within the city areas, in the clusters where they do not have the resources or support. So that's one thing. So working with them in terms of education, in terms of training and employment which can be sustainable, which can be long-term, where they do not have to worry what to feed the children in the evening, So that's one part. And the other part that I have started to work and again after the COVID-19 crisis is the Rohingya refugee community, and we realized that although the Nepal government has recognized them, has given them a space to stay, which is and also by the international, UNHCR, they are doing the best they can, but still they're still not integrated into the community properly. The transition is still very rough, it's still very traumatic. There's no counseling services, there's no health services, there's children are still, wandering around the camp, they're not going to schools. There's so many things that are lacking in that community, and this is where we also have identified the gap that as a country, as a Nepalese community, we must really help them integrate into the mainstream community, and particularly the children need to start going to school. So that's where our main focus is at the moment. And the last one that we are working with is a remote village in Nepal, which is Laprak in Gorkha. That was the epicenter of earthquake in 2015, and that's where we also realized that there's most of the men are abroad, in Gulf countries, trying to earn their living, or earn something that they can send back to families. But because of the, again, lack of education, lack of trainings, lack of skills, they don't have a lot of earnings in those countries as well. And most of the people in the communities are elderly people or women or children. And children do not go to schools because the schools are 2 hours away, 3 hours away, 4 hours away. They do not have uniforms, they do not have stationery. The women do not have a job. We saw a lot of people also. I don't want to call it depression because I cannot name it, but a lot of them were mentally affected with all this situation, particularly after the earthquake. So this is where we also have recognized and that there's something that we can do there. So we've been distributing stationery and toys to kids, and also what we distributed warm clothes to them, but we want to look at a more sustainable approach where we are going to look for scholarship for children, and also perhaps in the future they find a school or build a school which can be easily accessible. So these are some of the areas that we've been working at the moment.
Amazing. Thanks for sharing a bit of the context. And is there any organisations you've come across in particular that have a really inspiring aid and development model that really uplift the people? And because, I've been the 16, 17 years that I've been working in Nepal, I've seen so many, and I know you would have too, so many different approaches and different levels of effectiveness, in communities, and different levels of understanding of the local community. Obviously, if you're Nepalese, you might have a better understanding than some of the international organisations as well, unless they've spent a long time and, just knowing the language and knowing the culture. And so are there any examples that you've seen that are really effective in really uplifting? Because I know sometimes and you just mentioned a few of these segments in society, but the poorest of the poor get left behind as well, because it takes so long to be able to show any donor reporting of progress, or which often donors demand. But it's actually, when you work with the poorest of the poor, it can take years, to see any sort of change, and it's obviously more difficult because they're illiterate. And so I'd love to just hear your thoughts around that.
So and I'm not saying this because you have 7 women, but what I saw the model of 7 women many years ago, and what I see it today is one of the things that I really like, because it's not only about giving them, it's not about welfare, it's not about just this is what you need and this is what we're going to give, but it's mostly about empowering them. You're giving them something that they can take outside of the organization. They can go and become independent. They can start a business on their own if they want to. And you're also creating income. You're generating income for them, which is allowing them to make decisions, which is allowing them to make choices. So not only training them, but also employing them in the field, in what you are doing, is one of the things that I see as a very powerful tool, because particularly with women, this is lacking in Nepal. It's still very lacking in Nepal, and that's a very empowering thing, because the children can now have moms who can make choices, who can make decisions, because they are also financially independent in many ways. So this is one of the 7 Women is definitely one of the organizations. And I have seen some other organizations which have I can't name them exactly, but I have seen them coming in and out of the picture many a times. So the small impacts that they have done, such as training, and then and at another stage they suddenly come and employ these women, and at another stage they are educating children. What I also see is Rotary clubs are really very good in this, because, as I said earlier, there's no agenda of benefit, or there's or the risk of any sort of false reports and such. With Rotary clubs, I've seen them doing really impactful work. All of the focus is always on the service and on the sustainable factor in the community. So I've seen big schools built, I've seen long-term educational programs, scholarships. So Rotary clubs are another organization that I see has been doing really great. Then I've seen some very small organizations. One of them is Bignaharta Nepal, which is, what they are doing is they are going to the communities, very remote communities, and they are they have identified the resource of income within the community, which is, making these organic brooms. I think you've seen in Nepal that we use, organic brooms, which is made of a plant. So these plants are grown in that community, and this organization actually goes and trains them how to grow these, plants, and how to tend to them, and also make this an income. So that's another organization that I've seen is doing a good job. Again, as you said just now, that these impacts are very slow and it cannot be seen right away, but this definitely, in a few years time, in 4 or 5 years time, you can see how people change, how the way they talk to you change, how they're empowered, how confident they are. So I think, in my mind, these are some organizations that are doing great, and there are so many others. There's so many organizations. I would not have time to explain about them all.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, and I think just if I can share a quick story, as you were talking, a flash of a man who came to our centre years ago came to mind, because I was very fortunate, actually, like you've been, to see the operation of many different charities before I even met the 7 women who were in the tin shed with disabilities, and before I even knew really the magnitude of some of the suffering and the lifestyles of some of the women in Nepal. I didn't realise it was such a mass scale. And I didn't realise there were so many people in need. For me, it was just kind of meeting the initial 7 women who were, didn't really have a proper place to live and struggling to make the ends meet with their income. But I remember, because I was over there co-leading groups of architects at the time with the Duke of Edinburgh, and I saw the way they were working in communities, and it was a very eye-opening experience. And I think the international aid field is, when you see how, because it's, humans and social issues in society, it's not black and white. Humans are not black and white. There's so many interesting, grey areas. And so that really sparked curiosity in me, that experience of leading the group of architects, and as to how organisations do make real and lasting change. So I went back to Kathmandu and I visited basically whoever would have me and show me around their organisation to understand, the effective ones and the non-effective ones, and very quickly, and I'm sure you've realised the same thing, but what became very obvious to me was the ones that were empowering and upskilling and training, and really, as we started this conversation, drawing out the potential in the people that they're serving, were creating amazing ripple effects. And the ones that were based on dependency and handouts, were often, going down the corrupt road, which was, really sad to see, because the people were genuinely in need. So, and I'm not saying that, there isn't a place for handing out food, and, we did a bit of that during COVID too, through you and independent of you as well, which was great to be able to do. But it was, so the man who flashed into my head was, when we were starting 7 Women, by the time I met the 7 women, I was very clear on that, whatever we do must be around empowerment. And so it was, I used to call it kind of tough love, because of course you want to be able to give somebody everything, especially, I think many maybe listeners could resonate with this. When you visit a country, or even in your own country, and see someone need, you just feel like, oh, what have I got? What can I give them, kind of thing. But it was, almost counterintuitive and harder to not give immediately, and kind of go, okay, how can we support these people to stand on their own 2 feet and develop the skills where, when I'm out of the picture, they'll be able to continue to earn money. And that's what we started 7 Women. That was, the core foundation of how we operate, and has been ever since. But meanwhile, as the word grew, and as the women told other people that they knew what we were doing, we used to have people coming every day on a regular basis to ask for work and ask for training opportunities. And just when we'd kind of really clarified that, a guy knocked on the little tin gate and came in, and he had, I'll never forget the image. He had this kind of catheter. It was a plastic bag coming out of his stomach, like a really bad kind of job of it as well. He didn't have enough money to even provide for his own medical needs. And I just remember kind of him lifting up his shirt and showing us the thing, and it was just like, oh my God, okay. And he was asking for, such a small amount of money that would pay for proper bags, you know, that he could hook onto the thing on his stomach. And so that, you know, there's so many moments like that where you just, you know, like, yes, whatever you need, kind of, I'll help you here. But it is about kind of tough love, and it is about developing the you know, the abilities of those that you're trying to serve, because that really builds their confidence too. And I think, you know, it's really paid off what we've done. And the women, you know, even describe themselves, them being a caterpillar when they've come to the centre. And, you know, in the cocoon, they're learning new skills. And with the banner, you've probably seen the banner at our centre. We put the banner up there. And then when they're a butterfly, they're starting to be financially independent and socially empowered too, through supporting each other. And then they're able to, you know, the cluster of butterflies, or whatever you call it, reach out to others. So that, you just reminded me of that, the power of actually taking that approach. Might not be seen immediately, but long term, you get the most incredible ripple effect out to the community and out to others, because everyone, you know, and I think this is part of the nature of the Nepali people that I've had the privilege in meeting, and the women, whenever they've got on their own 2 feet, all they want to do is to be able to share it with others. So that's just been so humbling to see the ripple effect of them really kind of reaching out to others then. So yeah. Amazing. And I'd love to kind of ask you about your, which is really inspiring to me, and I've loved seeing your photos online of your new dwelling, which is, you know, a tiny house. And lots of people have heard about the tiny house movement, and they're so cute. So I'd love to hear about, like, how you got into that and the process of building it, and now what you're into. You know, I know that you're into growing your own vegetables and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so this kind of, you know, became, I think it sort of evolved from an interest to, you know, a definite goal, like this is what I want to do after a few years. So I used to watch a lot of videos in the YouTube, particularly Living Big in a Tiny House. And Brian, I think he's from New Zealand. So I used to really like his videos, and how he used to portray the tiny houses, how it's perfect for people who are trying to live, you know, comfortably, but also with very small footprint. And also it's great in ways of, you know, financially really good, you know, there's not a lot of burden on it, and at the same time it's really cute. As you said, it's very adorable. So this is what I was looking at from a few years. And then what happened was I got diagnosed with lupus SLE, and that sort of, you know, limited my ability to you know, do a lot of things. And one of them was climbing stairs. So the houses we were in, particularly in Nepal, as you see, a lot of urban houses are, you know, 2 or 3 stories, and I was not able to climb stairs up and down some days, and it was just too difficult to maintain, because we're all working people, my husband and I working people, and we have dogs, you know, it's just too much maintenance, and in the long term it was expensive to maintain it as well. But more than that, we were starting to also look at simplicity. A lot of things that we choose in life make things complicated, you know. Trying to have a big house, trying to have a bigger vehicle, trying to have a bigger this and that, you know, it's just going to sometimes makes things complicated. So we started to think of ways to simplify our life, and one of the decisions was tiny house. So in Nepal, that's another fact about Nepal, the land prices in the cities are expensive. They're very expensive. So we were looking at exploring opportunities where we can, you know, sort of build this tiny house. And the lands that our families had were, you know, in the outskirts of the valley or out of the city. And right now, to build a tiny house in those on those lands was not very practical, because then we would have to commute to work. So and you know, with the traffic jam and also with the lack of proper roads, you know, it would be not very practical. So what we decided to then do was we leased a piece of land for 10 years. And it's right in the city, in a beautiful area. It's a residential area, but it's got enough land where we can grow our vegetables, where our dogs can run. That was a beautiful sight to see when my dog could run. And also have our offices there in a few months to come. So this is how we decided that let's do this. And I would say this is not at all typical of Nepalese people, particularly of young people like us, married couples like us. Usually people just tend to go and start to buy a land and build a house, and it's a very traditional way of doing it, and that's very natural because in Nepal the tradition is always to secure a house. It's just a way to feel secure. It's just a way to show that you are prosperous. So you just show signs of prosperity, but we didn't want to go down that line. We just wanted to make our lives more simpler, so that in the years to come, we would have paid our loans and we would be free from all this financial burden. We would have a beautiful place to live in. And because we have leased the land, we have it for 10 years, but 10 years is a long time. By that time, we are really hoping that the roads out of valley are constructed, and we want to eventually move out of the city into the in a fairly I would say not very remote, but a rural area with more land, to where we can have more vegetables and trees, and a tiny house there. So this is how we decided to go for it. And within the house also, I did not want to just go give it to the contractors and build it. So we were involved in the building process. I salvaged a lot of things. I went to these recycle centers, and got my bathtub, and I went to the tile factories and got all the salvaged out all the broken tiles and made collage out of those. I did a lot of those things that could help in giving doing something that's beautiful, but at the same time that's reusing stuff that is going to be thrown out into the dumping site. They're going to stay there for years, so it's not sustainable at all. So this way we are really trying to also inspire young people like us to look at different ways of living life, which is still very beautiful. I think more beautiful than having the traditional methods. And that's evident because as soon as I posted that house into social media, or whenever people come and see, they say like, this is perfect. This is what their reaction is most of the time. And that shows me that ultimately that's what people want, a tiny house where it's very cozy, and you have a land to work on, you have earth to touch, and you have vegetables that you can grow on your own, and that's what we ultimately want. So that's what we are doing, and we absolutely love our tiny house, and we call it Tiny Blessings.
Oh my God, I love the name. So good. So good.
Thank you.
And, the power of you creating that, the creation has come from you and you being involved in it. That's, I think that's when we can really unleash our creativity, because so much love has obviously gone into it. And even you're being the example. So I think maybe for some people, they wouldn't even know how to imagine a tiny house or how it is to live there. But I'm sure your tiny house, Tiny Blessings, is going to become a beacon of light for others to take inspiration from, and to visit and to kind of go, oh my goodness, I want one of these, or almost like a shift in the mindset for some people to go, oh my God, I thought it was, as you said, a sign of prosperity and stuff to have a big house, but you're showing people another way, which is more, as you said, earthing and grounding, to actually be able to work on your own piece of land, and the dog has the space, and so unreal, so good.
Thank you so much. It's been beautiful. I can't
wait to come and visit it and see it in reality. It'd be awesome.
Oh, please do.
Amazing. Maybe we could even bring the tour groups there in future to check it out and take inspiration.
Oh, absolutely. We're planning to do barbecues. We're going to add a few things slowly. So it will be a perfect place for family gatherings, friends. Yeah.
So it's so good. And I think I'll put a link in the bio to this podcast about tiny houses, because I think, globally people are really coming back to their center and what's important in life, and also, you know, how can we be sustainable as humans and sovereign, you know, and how can we rely less on the system. You know, if the rules are constantly changing in the system, we actually need to know that we can take care of ourselves and that we have our freedom. So it's so incredible the timing that you've used this time, the last 12 months, to actually make your magnificent creation and be in the garden and, you know, be with the bricks and the water and the, so unreal, and you're doing the perfect work.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kusum, for sharing your, you know, adventurous life with us, and, you know, some of the things that you're involved in. I'd love to just kind of end this podcast on asking you, what is your future vision? What do you want to be doing, you know, 10 years down the track, apart from the house in the village and the vegetables and the trees and everything? What do you kind of see yourself doing in future?
So one thing that I also came to terms with is that when you want to serve the community, when you want to work in that field, you also need to be financially stable yourself, because this was a lesson from the COVID. And I want to serve the community, and that's what I want. I see myself doing in the next 10 or 20 or 30 years. But at the same time, I need to have something on the side, you know. So I'm starting to explore businesses which I can do, a small enterprise that can keep me going financially while I am able to serve the community, happily. Because another thing is that we sometimes forget to look after ourselves, because we are too busy serving others. And I have learned to now look after myself as well, and that helps me look after another person in a more powerful way. So in the next 10 years down the line, I see myself running a business, a successful business, and that helps me financially, and undoubtedly serving the community or communities wherever I see the need or wherever I can share my experience and knowledge. So that's what my dream is.
Amazing, and so good that it's so crystal clear for you, because that will absolutely manifest for you. So how exciting, and also interesting to put it in the context of what we've just been talking about. You know, I think we started 7 Women as a charity, and the charity actually operates like a business, and the profits go back into the community outreach. So, you know, along the line, I thought, well, why wouldn't we just run a business? Because there's so much less interference from, you know, the government in Nepal, the Social Welfare Council, the this, that and the other, and more rules coming at us every year. And you know, because the reason why we went charity was because of the tax, you know, because you've got to pay lots of tax. But now the government wants tax on all income earned from charities. So it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you do a business and make it, as you said, a successful business, and then you can create more and more jobs for people and have the freedom to really operate, you know, based on the need that you see in the community. So I just think the whole,
one of the, I think I was very inspired when I went to one of these leadership programs in Australia, when I saw Adara Group. I think you've heard of them as well. And the Adara Nepal here. So I met, she was a speaker, the founder of Adara Group was a speaker at one of those leadership conferences. And, I always remember what she said: because we have our own business and we run our charity through our profits, we do not have to expect someone else to help us. We want to help someone, we do it ourselves, because we are empowered to do so. And for many years, I've been trying to build that, myself. And I think I'm at a stage where maybe I'm not in that large, scale, but on a small scale, I'm ready to do that. So I've definitely realized how, independent you feel when you can, support these communities, support this cluster of people on your own. And when you have evidences of doing or serving the communities, or have evidences of this successful projects, then people are always ready to help. People are very generous. So when they see what the work we are doing, and I saw that myself during COVID-19, when there were so many people wanting to donate, wanting to help, and 7 Women was one of them, and you helped us in so many different projects. So if we do good thing, there's always going to be help coming in. But if we have something that keeps us going, like a business, then it's not going to stop. So yeah, that's what I want to do as well.
100%, and it comes back to that freedom, of being able to, so knowing that you can generate the income that you need to continue your programs, and you're not reliant, if you're a charity that is trying to empower and serve others, and you're disempowered because you're waiting on funding approval, or you've got strings attached to the amount of money that people are donating, it hinders the ability to grow. And so I'm so grateful that 7 Women has been able to provide for ourselves, and also it's setting a good example for those that you're supporting as well. And like we've just started a beauty parlor in our centre for the locals and expats, and also tourists when they start coming again to get haircuts and beauty treatment. But that enterprise is actually training the women as well on how to run a business. So we want to allow them to be able to go in and like play shop and get the feel of what it is like to run a business. So I think it's just so interesting to think about the history of aid, the international aid, and how it used to be done. It was all handouts, and I think that's interesting in itself, because that creates a mentality among people of expectation and entitlement and things like that, which you really need to work with in some areas, because it's not about that. It's like, no, actually, you have your hands and feet, or you have your brain that's working. You do something, and then you get rewarded for that, and then you help others to do the same. So it's just so interesting to kind of see, when you look at the history of international aid, the handout mentality, and then it started to be about training, and then that social enterprise is still quite new, that I don't think is fully understood in Nepal, in mainstream yet. And then there's kind of business, which is responsible business, which is run a business, create jobs, and do good things with the profits, above and beyond what you need to live a comfortable life. And I think you're a great example of that, Kusum. And it's it's such a privilege to be able to have this conversation with someone who really understands that, and to share it with our Inspiring Human podcast listeners. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much as well. I'm really glad to be able to share what I know, and you've been an inspiration to me from such a long time, from the time I went to 7 Women 7 or 8 years ago, it's really, really a privilege to be a part of this community where we're all trying to, help each other, encourage each other to grow.
Amazing. All right. Thanks a million.
Thank you so much. See you then. Bye.